Hi, I'm Makiza, and this is China Now. Welcome to the show and thanks for your time. Let's get started with China Currents, your weekly news report of what's happening in China. Today, it includes issues on security, the sports and politics as usual. So, on security, China's Ministry of State Security has successfully dismantled a case involving the British Secret Intelligence Service for reasons that Kris will tell you about shortly. And in sports, there's some information about Chinese football and an anti-corruption documentary which involves the former head coach of the Chinese national men's football team, which was aired on January 9th. And ahead in politics and international relations, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has raised red flags over the US, Japan, South Korea trilateral Indo-Pacific dialogue, which took place in Washington last week. Kris has details of these and many more stories coming up shortly. Don't go anywhere.
China Currents is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to China Currents. I'm Kris. On January 8th, China's Ministry of State Security has successfully dismantled a case involving the British Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, exposing their espionage activities in China through the use of individuals from a third country. A foreigner identified by surname Huang was in charge of an overseas consulting agency. The collaboration between MI6 and Huang began in 2015 when he was recruited and a cooperative intelligence relationship was established. Since then, MI6 directed Huang to enter China multiple times, guided him to collect intelligence under the disguise of public activities, and recruiting individuals for MI6. Through meticulous investigation, Chinese national security agencies uncovered evidence of Huang's involvement in espionage activities. In accordance with the law, they promptly took coercive measures against him. Security assessment revealed that Huang had transmitted 9 pieces of confidential national secrets, 5 pieces of secret-level national secrets, and 3 pieces of intelligence to British authorities. Next up, let's take a look at Chinese football. In an anti-corruption documentary aired on January 9th, shocking revelations have emerged regarding Li Tie, the former head coach of the national men's football team. Li admitted to paying bribes totaling 3 million yuan to secure his position as the national team coach. Additionally, he confessed that the 2 teams he coached are involved in match fixing on their way to promotion. Li disclosed that in the 2018 season, he lobbied Wuhan Zhou FC to pay 2 million yuan in bribes to Chen Chuyuan, the former head of the Chinese Football Association, and 1 million yuan in bribes to Liu Yi, former CFA Secretary General, in exchange for his appointment as the national team's head coach. Li then signed a contract with Wuhan Zhou FC for 6 million yuan, which served as the cover for the corrupt deal. As an exchange, he selected 4 players from the Wuhan club for the national team. Li Tie's confession led to an investigation by supervisory authorities, which subsequently exposed several other officials suspected of corruption and other wrongdoing within Chinese football. This scandal has further tarnished the reputation of the sport in the country. Next up, on January 9th, the Xichang Satellite Launch Center successfully launched the Einstein Probe satellite into its designated orbit at 15:03 local time. The satellite's launch was a resounding success, marking a significant milestone for China's space program. However, the incident took a comical turn when Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party authorities reacted in an alarmist manner. According to reports from Taiwan's United Daily News, the DPP's Defense Department issued 2 alerts in both Chinese and English, declaring a so-called island-wide warning. The alerts urged citizens to stay vigilant as a missile allegedly flew over the southern part of the island. However, the English version of that alert referred to the satellite launch as an air raid alert and even referred to the satellite as a missile, causing unnecessary panic among the public. With the election coming up, the incident has sparked debates about DPP's handling of defense-related matters and its potential political motivations. Critics argue that the false missile alert was an attempt to manipulate public sentiment and create a sense of crisis. In response to the uproar, Taiwan's Defense Department issued a statement acknowledging their mistake and apologizing to the public for confusion caused by the inaccurate translation. They admitted that the alert should have referred to the launch as a satellite, not a missile. Next up, on January 8th, China's Foreign Ministry expressed serious concerns over the US-Japan-South Korea trilateral Indo-Pacific dialogue took place last week in Washington. The dialogue's joint statement said that the three countries expressed concern about China's dangerous and escalatory behavior in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea and would continue their trilateral maritime security and law enforcement cooperation in the regions. During the press conference, China's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning refuted the accusations against China, condemning the dialogue as an attempt to cobble together exclusionary groupings in the name of cooperation and to interfere with China's internal affairs. Spokeswoman Mao pointed out that a certain non-regional country has sought to flex muscles and incite confrontation in the South China Sea, referring to the US-Philippines naval exercises held last week in the area. In response to the heightened tensions, Chinese Navy conducted naval and air patrols in the contested waters, reiterating its sovereignty over the contested Renai Reef unlawfully claimed by the Philippines. Next up on technology, China's domestically developed third-generation superconducting quantum computer named Origin Wukong was officially put into operation this Saturday at Origin Quantum Computing Technology Corporation. The quantum computer is equipped with 72 self-developed superconducting quantum chips called Wukong cores, making it the most advanced programmable and deliverable superconducting quantum computer in China. According to Dr. Kong Wei Cheng, Deputy Director of the Anhui Quantum Computing Engineering Research Center, Origin Wukong is paired with the third-generation quantum computing measurement and control system, Origin Tianji. It has achieved the first batch of fully automated testing of quantum chips in China, significantly improving the overall operational efficiency of quantum computers. Wukong's name was inspired by Sun Wukong, a fictional figure with the ability to transform into 72 different forms, symbolizing the computer's powerful and versatile capabilities. This marks a significant milestone in China's quantum computing capabilities, demonstrating advancements in chip technology, automation, and quantum system integration. Next up on diplomacy, during the first state visit of newly elected President Mohamed Muizzu to Beijing on January 10th, China and the Maldives elevated their relationship to a higher level. Chinese President Xi Jinping, addressing a gathering at the Great Hall of the People, referred to Muizzu as an old friend and announced the upgrade of the bilateral ties to a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership. China currently maintains a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership with 35 other countries, including Iran, Indonesia, Greece, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil, which is 3 levels higher than the China-India relationship. According to a report from the American Enterprise Institute think tank, Chinese companies have invested an additional $1.37 billion in the Maldives since the country's decision to join the Belt and Road Initiative in 2014. President Xi stated, China and the Maldives' relations are presented with a historic opportunity to build upon the past and advance into the future. Next up, let's look at CPC's latest effort in anti-corruption. On January 8th, the General Secretary of CPC, Xi Jinping, addressed at the annual conference of the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, the party's top supervisory authority. In a speech, Xi emphasized that the decade-long efforts of the anti-corruption struggle have achieved an overwhelming victory. However, Xi pointed out the situation remains severe and complex, and tough battles against corruption require sustained efforts. As the largest Marxist ruling party in the world, the CPC needs to promote self-revolution to ensure that the party will never change its nature, its conviction, or its character. The anti-corruption campaign began after the conclusion of the CPC's 18th National Congress in 2012 and has become the largest organized anti-corruption efforts in the party's history. As of the party's 20th National Congress in 2022, discipline inspection authorities nationwide have initiated investigations into 4.65 million cases and disciplined over 4.57 million individuals. By the first week of the 2024, 35 government officials have been removed from their positions for investigation. The party's effort has been overwhelmingly approved by the people, specifically because Xi vowed to crack down on both high-level and local officials. Since 2012, over 100 high-ranking party, government, and military officials have been investigated, including 7 national leaders. The highest-ranking figure among them was Zhou Yongkang, a member of the 17th Politburo Standing Committee. The most recent concluded investigation involving high-ranking official was of Dong Yunhu, former chairman of the Shanghai's Municipal People's Congress. He was arrested on December 29, 2023 by order of the country's Supreme Procurator. Last but not least, on January 9th, in a routine press conference held by the Civil Aviation Administration of China, officials announced that the 2024 Spring Festival travel season is set to commence on January 26 and will extend through March 5th, spanning a total of 40 days. This period, also known as Chunyun, is often considered the largest annual human migration in the world, as millions of Chinese nationals travel for the Chinese New Year celebrations. Predictions indicate that the passenger traffic in civil aviation will reach a staggering 80 million during the Chunyun period, averaging 2 million per day, a figure that is poised to set a new historical record. The peak of the travel rush is expected to hit on February 8th, February 16th, February 20th, and February 25th. The Spring Festival, also known as the Chinese New Year, is the most important traditional holiday in China, with the country virtually shutting down as people take time off from work to be with family and friends. The travel season presents remarkable logistical challenges as the country's transportation infrastructure deals with an immense surge in traffic. The aviation industry has been preparing to handle the increased number of travelers, ensuring safety and efficiency are prioritized. China's airports will likely see a significant uptake in foot traffic, with stringent measures in place to handle the holiday rush smoothly. That's all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts and comments about our show, please reach us at email address below. I'm Kris. Looking forward to hearing from you, and see you next time.
And that's all for China Currents with Kris. Up next is Threshold with Lisa, where you get all updates on science and technology. And today's topic is largely on the Einstein Probe, which is not just any satellite, but a powerful X-ray observatory developed through international partnership between Chinese researchers, the European Space Agency, and Germany to understand flashes in the night sky. Very interesting, right? More details soon. Please stay.
On January the 9th, just days before the election, an unexpected incident occurred in Taiwan, where an alert was issued regarding a missile flying over the island and urged citizens to stay vigilant of an air raid. However, it turns out that the missile was actually the Einstein Probe satellite launched from the Xichang Satellite Launch Center. So what exactly is the Einstein Probe? And why was an island-wide alert issued? Hi, I'm Lisa, and this is Threshold in China. Following the surprising alert in Taiwan, let's explore the real story behind it. Launched on January the 9th, the Einstein Probe is not just any satellite. It's a groundbreaking X-ray observatory developed through international collaboration between Chinese researchers, the European Space Agency, and Germany's Max Planck Institute for Extraterrestrial Physics. Weighing 1.45 tons, the observatory is positioned in orbit 600 kilometers, that is about 370 miles above the Earth's surface. It featured a wide-field X-ray telescope, constructed using innovative technologies that imitate the structure of the lobster eye. This unique design enables the telescope to scan large areas of the sky and detect X-ray sources that were previously unknown. Additionally, the follow-up X-ray telescope will zoom in on the new X-ray sources or events, providing high-resolution observations throughout its 5-year operation. According to Yuan Weimin, the mission's chief scientist at the National Astronomical Observatories in Beijing, the probe's detection ability is more than 10 times higher than that of the similar telescope worldwide. Yuan explains that the probe can detect weaker and more distant signals, view them with greater clarity, and pinpoint their locations more accurately. Eric Kukers, the ESA's project scientist for the mission, expressed his excitement for the launch. He has been collaborating with the Chinese and German colleague on this project since 2018. Kukers stated that the probe's wide field of view allowed it to capture more bursts of X-ray than previous satellites. Now, observing X-ray in space poses significant challenges. X-ray is a form of electromagnetic radiation, and it provides valuable insight into high-energy processes occurring in the universe. However, many of these phenomena are transient and hard to detect, such as black hole tidal disruptions and the collision of extremely dense objects. Moreover, soft X-ray emitted during the initial stages of these events are difficult to capture due to the Earth's atmosphere, which absorbs them. This is where the space-based observatories like the Einstein Probe become crucial. One other challenge is that the focusing soft X-ray through fraction or reflection is extremely challenging. Since the 1960s, more than 50 telescopes have been launched into the space to study cosmic X-ray. However, most of these telescopes have limited views. While some can quickly scan the sky, they could only see the brightest source. In 1980, Roger Angel from the University of Arizona developed a unique design for X-ray telescope that would have both a wide field of view and decent resolution. His inspiration came from crustaceans like lobsters and shrimp, which developed eyes with special structure to survive in murky environments underwater. A lobster eye has many tiny square-shaped tubes that converge towards a central spherical point. This structure allows light from all directions to reflect inside the tube and focus on the retina, giving the lobster an unlimited field of view. Angel's idea remained a challenge for a long time until recent years when microprocessing technology matured, making a technique called micropore optics possible. The wide-field X-ray telescope on the Einstein Probe consists of 12 modules, each containing over 30 million square micropores. Each pore measures 14 micrometers along the side and is coated with an ultra-thin iridium layer to enhance reflectivity. According to Yuan, the surface of these pores must be extremely flat and smooth with an error of less than 1 nanometer. It took his team a decade to develop the lobster eye-like modules. For the first time, microporous lobster eye technology has been extensively applied in a wide-field X-ray focusing imaging telescope, and this technology has been fully localized. Thanks to its design, the Einstein Probe can observe an area of the sky over 10,000 times larger than the size of a full moon at any given time. In contrast, existing large X-ray telescopes like NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory can only image a section of the sky that is smaller than the size of a full moon. This means the Einstein Probe could observe almost the entire night sky in just 3 orbits around Earth, taking less than 5 hours. The probe's mission is multifaceted. It will systematically survey the sky, detecting X-rays from various cosmic objects including black holes, neutron stars, and supernovae. Of particular interest is its ability to detect dormant, supermassive black holes. These giants remain hidden until a nearby star drifts too close. When this happens, the black hole awakens, tearing the star apart and emitting X-rays that the Einstein Probe can detect. Another significant role of the Einstein Probe is its contribution to the search of gravitational waves. These ripples in spacetime, predicted by Einstein's series of general relativity, are generated by events such as neutron star collision. With its wide field of view, the probe is perfectly positioned to localize these events and observe their X-ray emissions, complementing ground-based gravitational wave detectors. Simply put, the Einstein Probe is a high-tech watchtower in space, giving us a new lens to observe and understand the most powerful events in the universe. It is a step towards answering fundamental questions about the nature of these extraordinary phenomena. And that is all for today's Threshold. We hope you like this new section on science and technology in China. As usual, we welcome your feedback and thoughts.
Thanks for the updates, Lisa. We are super grateful. Next up is the Thinkers Forum, where we'll hear from the director of the Geopolitical Economy Research Group at the University of Manitoba, Alan Freeman, in an interview on the year 2023 in retrospect. He'll also answer some very important questions on how the UK's 2024 election will play out and whether or not the imperialist forces are starting their process of contracting. Stay tuned.
The word is hubris. Hubris is a Greek word, and it was actually rose to the center in ancient Athens at the time when there was a very big sort of revolutionary process going on. The dictatorship of Draco had provoked a sort of meltdown of the Athenian economy, and I'm going to come on to that because there are parallels in terms of economy. But anyway, then the citizens of Athens and the surroundings asked a man called Solon to create a set of laws for Athens. So Solon actually abolished debt enslavement, which was a phenomenal step and is still very relevant today. Then he introduced a series of measures to correct the balance in terms of the power of the aristocracy that was being abused and misused. And the Athenian constitution introduced a law against hubris. Now, not many people know it's a law. In the West, the word just simply is taken to mean arrogant pride. Hubris, I think, is the correct pronunciation, but I'm not a Greek scholar, so sorry to any Greek scholars listening. Arrogant pride. Now, in mythology in Greece, arrogant pride is punished by the goddess called Nemesis. And Nemesis exacts vengeance on people who have been guilty of arrogant pride. But the crime of arrogant pride was you could actually take somebody to court in Athens for arrogant pride, which means you abused the power that you possessed against a poor person. So it was a law specifically introduced to rectify the imbalance between the power of the rich aristocrats who were actually ruining the economy because they misused and abused the power. But the issue was whether they should have power at all, which is what we confront today. So it was a crime because that was the way that Solon thought it was possible to rectify these imbalances and save the Athenian economy and polity. Now, why is that relevant today? Because what we see is hubris in terms of the imperial rulers of the world. At the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the special military operation, if you think about it, what things people were saying at the time, they said, Biden said, the Russian economy will be asphyxiated. The commentators, sort of slightly before the beginning of last year, but it's a continuous process, that Russia is isolated, that sanctions will destroy Russia, that Russia will be defeated and crushed. This didn't happen. Now we see, on the contrary, after resistance of the Palestinian people on October the 7th, and the ongoing consequence of that the arrogant pride of the current prime minister, the current president of Israel, of Netanyahu, is being punished by Nemesis because he believed that it was everybody believed, and the Zionist state is what I will call it, of Israel, managed to convince the world, many people who didn't like what it was doing, that it was invincible, that it was invulnerable, that nothing could be done to stop it. This was not the case. That myth was shattered by those events. So that events, both in Ukraine and in the world economy, and in Ukraine, the world economy, in Palestine, in Israel, have been shattered, that the illusions that people had that they were all powerful, mighty, that they would carry all before them, they were invulnerable, Iron Dome would protect you against any possible attack, is shattered. So the pride, the arrogant pride, has been punished. But I'll finish on this point. The punishment has actually been inflicted in Greek mythology. Punishments are often inflicted by either heroic figures or mythical figures, such as Nemesis, which is incarnated in the person of a goddess. The goddess in this case is the economy, that the hubristic belief that their economies are superior to all other economies in the world, and therefore they have the right to impose that economic system on the world, that they have the ability to impose that economic system on the world, that they can force the rest of the world to trade with them under circumstances of their choosing, even though this impoverishes the vast majority of people in the world. That is being punished because their own economies are declining and continue to decline. And this is something that's often forgotten because it's portrayed by the people of the West as if the problems in their economy is something that is being done to them, that it's the Putin price hike that caused inflation, that it's, I don't know, the sort of now the latest culprit are the Houthis. So a tiny, very poor, very battered, but very brave and courageous people in the corner of the Arabian Peninsula are now responsible for the collapse of world shipping and the world economy. Well, they've certainly done some damage to those parts which were dependent on the oil trade, but they're not the ones responsible for the economic crisis. This is something these countries have done to themselves. And that, to me, is why the word hubris, not merely because of the visible form, which is these political and military setbacks, but the fact that the economies of the countries who rest their claim to their pride on what they consider to be the superiority of their economic systems have got the shock of finding that, first of all, those economic systems are not anymore accepted by the rest of the world, which is why we have the formation and strengthening of the BRICS and alternative trading alliances. But second, these economies are not recovering. They're not forging ahead. There's a lot of very almost falsified, but I would say sort of wishful thinking economic data, which is pumped out by their agencies. But they're not working. These economies are not working. And that's why many countries are opting to look for economic alternatives, above all, alternative economic alliances. And that, to me, is one of the most, well, economic and political, but one of the most significant and central outcomes of this year. It makes the world a very dangerous place. I don't think it will create anything that I would recognize as a revolution. It creates political chaos. What you have is what I call a moral crisis. A moral crisis is when people believe that certain remedies will achieve certain ends, and therefore these ends are good, and they're justified, therefore, in carrying out these things, and they don't work. So then first of all, people say, well, somebody else was responsible. You always look around to blame somebody else, especially if you're very powerful and mighty, because you can't believe that you yourself might have weaknesses. That's one of the sins of hubris, is the inability to recognize one's own weaknesses. But the result is political chaos, and the moral crisis we're now facing is, in my opinion, a moral crisis of Western liberal democracy. That what is being shown up is that system is not democratic. It doesn't live up to its own claims. I'm not saying democracy is wrong. What I'm saying is Western liberal democracy is not democratic. And this is now becoming very clear. All the liberal values which Western liberal democracy, representative parliamentary democracy, let's call it, was supposed to achieve, are one by one falling. Freedom of speech. Julian Assange has been imprisoned without any legitimate charges being directed against him for 8 years. That's something that's happened to democracies. The two leading, self-proclaimed leading democracies of the world, the United States and the United Kingdom, have worked together to bring this about. But you also see the chaos in the American political system. That basically both Biden and Trump now have among the lowest approval ratings, I think, in history, certainly for a very long time. I've been trying to follow the polls, so I may be corrected on whether it's the absolute low. It's certainly not very good. Well, how are they dealing with this? They're not dealing it by confronting the truth. They're not dealing with it by coming out with what's really happening. To the contrary, when people protest and say that this is a genocidal assault on the people of Gaza, when they say South Africa is right to take Israel, the government of Israel, to the International Criminal Court, I believe it was the ICC they've taken them to, for genocide, with very, very detailed evidence of that fact, they say, if you say this in our country, you will be sacked. So you are sacked basically for telling something that most people in the world recognize as truth. That is not a democratic achievement. So finally, what's happening is the suppression of political opposition. There are two parties in America, and neither of them represents what the vast majority of American people want. Polls consistently show the majority of the people in America want a ceasefire in Gaza. But if you stand up for that, you're pilloried, you're sacked. How then is the Biden side dealing with the Trump side? Well, basically by making it impossible for the win by what used to be called lawfare, by taking court decisions to use against Trump. Now, I'm not saying this as a supporter of Trump. What I'm saying is the methods that are being adopted to conduct the political battle are not the methods of democracy. They are the methods of legal suppression, of basically making it impossible for a proper open debate about the issues at stake to take place. So I don't, and I could go on, because the same thing is happening in all countries. Macron, I mean, this extraordinary episode in England where Pruella Braverman, the Home Secretary, which is basically head of the security services, tried to ban a demonstration of 1 million people. Fortunately, she was prevented from doing so. And actually, she had to resign, which was a big democratic achievement in my place. But you have Macron wanting to ban the Palestinian flag. You have many countries, particularly Britain, trying to ban strikes. So all the traditional democratic rights that were supposed to be what we are fighting for, the freedoms, the liberty that we're fighting for, are being abolished in the name of democracy. So I don't think what you're seeing at present is a revolutionary process. I think you're seeing something very dangerous, which is the collapse of the pretense of democracy, that the imposition of what America, in many, what I call a two-party dictatorship. People are always saying, China is very bad because it's a one-party dictatorship, which is not true, because there are several parties in China, as we know. But what you have in the United States and Britain is a two-party dictatorship. And the most that one can hope for, and I'm certainly working to this end, but actively, not just academically, is a breakdown in the consensus that the only choice is between these two parties, the lesser evil idea. And none of these countries took principal positions as regards to what was happening in Ukraine, which is just as tragic if you look at what was just as genocidal, if you look at what Ukraine, the government of Kiev, was trying to do to the people, the Russian speakers of Ukraine. It's just as terrible, but they didn't react in that way. They didn't understand what's going on. Now they do. So it's a mixture. Some countries are, maybe the leaders are waking up. Sadly, not enough of them. In other countries, you have political chaos, but what one hopes for is the emergence of a breakdown of the consensus that the only way to get anything done is to vote for one of the two pro-imperial parties. As an economist, one of the first lessons I learned is this: never predict anything, especially the future, because things always surprise you. You cannot tell. What one can do is one can look at trends. Every time in the past history of Britain, when I've attempted to guess what's going to happen, it's happened in a different way. Not so long ago in Britain, one of the forms of expression of the desire for a much more radical programme was the growth of a left-wing Scottish National Party, which is, from 30 years, 20 years I spent in Scotland, the last thing that one would have expected at once. But that's what happened. Corbyn was very unexpected. So you can look at economic trends and say the British economy is in a huge mess. You can also say neither party has solutions that will cure the economy. One can say that the solution that was put forward by Jeremy Corbyn when he was leader of the Labour Party, has the support of 30 or 40% of the population of Britain. And when you get to such a large percentage of the population that are opposed to what the political leaders say, it's like boiling a kettle when you're trying to keep the lid on. It's a pressure cooker. It will come out in some way. So I think the best thing I can say about the election is expect the unexpected. Look for the unexpected. Don't imagine that things will happen in the way that one traditionally thinks they're going to happen. Work hard, stay calm, be brave, and watch for the signs, as was the slogan on a very interesting, very lovely Canadian radio program about Indigenous people. Stay calm, be brave, and watch for the signs. Without a shadow of doubt, October the 7th. That dwarfs absolutely everything. This has brought to the fore the political incapacity of the West, because it not only inspired millions, tens of millions of people the world over, it broke through the veil of deception that prevails in the West, so that young people came out on the streets and continue to come out on the streets inspired by that. And so we're not putting up with it. We're not putting up with what Israel is doing in response. You're not entitled to kill children, women, and civilians simply because you've been attacked. I think the other thing to say about that's very important is this moral crisis of democracy that I've talked about. One of the phenomena that's happening as a result of the moral crisis of democracy is people are abandoning law. It's a crime. What Israel is doing and has done as occupier of a country containing an indigenous population that was there and shares that land with them historically is a crime. It's an international crime. The indiscriminate attacks on women, children, civilians is a crime. So that is being exposed. And finally, as somebody of a Jewish background, what I think was very, very moving is that Jewish people are now taken to the streets, and Jewish people are saying Judah is not Zionism. They're not the same thing. So that there are veils of deception which have prevailed for such a long time that resistance has produced. So it's not merely a military, it's actually above all a political, a social, and an inspiring human event. And I think nothing could be put on a parallel with that. So I'm going to say that is the event of last year. War is horrible, and the greatest glorifiers of war is the Israeli military apparatus and system. They have stood up in front of the world since the Six-Day War, since before, and said our principal claim to land is our capacity to mobilize force. They've used force without restraint. The foundation of Israel involved groups that were at the time described as terrorists, such as the Stone Gang. Force has been an element of the current state of Israel since its inception. They have been at war with the people of Israel, and I include the Palestinians as peoples of Israel, since the inception of Israel. Now, then if you look at what the law says, so war is horrible, but let's look at where the war started. A further point that should be made is it's not just the Zionist state, it's the US and Canadians and Britain and the guarantors of the Palestinian settlements that have failed to live up to their international legal obligations. There are now 600,000 illegal settlers in the West Bank. They use force, they shoot people. The videos I've seen, they're now shooting on Palestinian settlers, Palestinians of the area who've lived there for thousands of years. Now, the law says that the people of an occupied country have the right to resist. It's not a terrorist attack. I don't agree that the correct description of what Hamas and its supporters, because there are several factions in this, have done, is not war. It's resistance, and resistance is justified. Now, resistance takes forms that we don't find acceptable, but their response to something much less acceptable, they're the product of that. They're the product of desperation. What else is left of them? Every democratic means, every parliamentary means has been undertaken. They concluded the Oslo Accords, and they were not respected. So when all peaceful, all non-harmful processes have been exhausted, nothing is left if you're confronting force but force. So it's very sad, but the solution is to stop using war as a means of imposing power, which is what the West and the Zionist government of Israel, one half of it, because there's an opposition in Israel, a very heroic Jewish resistance, which is opposition, which you now begin to see on the streets of Tel Aviv in mixed forms. But you begin to see that existed for a long time. That's the solution, not to go around saying you don't have the right to resist. Yes, you do have the right to resist. I think that violence is an absolute last resort, and that even when violence is undertaken, it's very important to minimize the damage to the innocent. And I think there's growing evidence. A lot of the harm that was originally attributed to Hamas was in fact not committed by Hamas, that Israel was also responsible for the deaths of many Israelis because of the indiscriminate methods they used. So the truth will come out in due course. We will actually begin this persistent machine of essentially lying about who is responsible for what, which is, what's called the disinformation, or what do they call it, mixed warfare. Misinformation is part of the way that the Western powers go to war now. So we will find out in due course the truth of how much damage the resistance actually caused. One regrets every such damage to people who are not direct parties to the conflict. One regrets it. Nevertheless, that's what happens in war. The issue is whether you seek to minimize that, which I think that is what Hamas is trying to do, and what those who seek to, focus on military targets seek to do. Incidentally, that is what we see in these tit-for-tat escalations in Ukraine, that the attacks on Belgorod, which were conducted by the Kiev regime, were done in daylight on New Year's Eve when everybody was out on the streets. They had no military function whatsoever. Their function was simply to kill as many people as possible and terrorize them. That was a terrorist act. I think Russia, quite correct to characterize that as a criminal terrorist act, to ask the United Nations Security Council to condemn it. If you look at what the Russians are doing, on the whole, I'm not, giving a white sheet, but at least what they claim they're doing, and the evidence suggests that that's largely what they're doing, is to highlight military targets and try and minimize civilian damage. And Putin, in his latest speech, said we have the capacity to carpet bomb Kiev, which everybody has taken as a threat. But he said, we're not going to do that because that's not what we do. So if you take people at their word, and if you look at the facts, because Kiev does not deny that it attacks civilians, doesn't deny it, then you say there are two different attitudes to the way that to acts of war in which civilians are killed, which is one is that we use it quite deliberately, which is what actually Ukraine was doing to Donetsk for 11 years before the special military operation, which nobody wept any tears over, and attacking military targets with the risk of collateral damage. So they are different things. Can't mix them all up together. I'm never happy with commemorating individuals. That if I were to say the most memorable, it would be the people of Palestine as a whole, and one would not single out one person above any other. Memorable is a difficult word. It's who comes to memory. And there are certainly two figures that I think have figured very centrally, which are Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. But strangely enough, the figure that probably should be remembered more than is being done is Maduro of Venezuela. Because Maduro and his government were targeted, have been the longest targets, except for Cuba, I think, and Iran possibly, of Western sanctions. And they've come out on top. They've rescued the Venezuelan economy. They have restored some form of political balance. They've achieved the liberation, the complete illegal capture of Alex Saab. It is now the terrorist opposition, people like Guaido, who's pictured on television throwing Molotov cocktails, which is supposed to be wonderful. Nobody said Guaido was a terrorist. He organized soldiers to kill people. He threw Molotov cocktails at people. He took part in very murderous acts against civilians that he is now isolated from his own party and from the government, quite correctly. And this in the face of, the most concerted campaign against Venezuela on the behalf of America, the United States, and Britain particularly, but by including seizure of their gold completely illegally by a so-called court in Britain, all kinds of things. Now the Americans are coming begging and saying, look, excuse me, we want your oil because of what we've done to the Russians. That is nemesis in action. I think the figure that deserves to be known and memorized the most is Nicolas Maduro. And let's not forget Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president as well, who is a towering figure, in my opinion.
Well, 2024 promises to be a very interesting year. And that's all for the show today. My name is Makiza Micheline Latifa, and I want to say thank you for spending your morning with us here on China Now. We hope that you are gradually getting to know more about China. Please do not forget to send in your comments, your thoughts, feedbacks, and suggestions for the coming episodes of the show through the email provided below. Thanks for watching and see you same time next week.